Cool.
This
I don't know.
time
You
it didn't
like. I
start.
mean, yeah.
Wait,
what
I
are we
was
waiting for?
finally-
I don't
No,
know. I mean,
Johnny.
it looks like the recording started.
stop.
No.
Nope.
This is his game that he likes to
What are we
play.
looking?
Johnny,
Mhm.
listen.
What?
Welcome.
You can't just randomly start a recording and then when nobody reacts, you start talking. I finally built up a way to do this, but it's okay. We'll try this again. Johnny, welcome to the circle.
I'm always here. Thanks.
Yeah, well, you make my life better every day. Howling,
Hey, what's up?
Stony, thank you for joining us.
Good evening to all.
And our guest is Luna. How are you? Thank
Yeah.
you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, before we start asking you questions and getting into the whole interview process, our last circle episode, we had Jinx, and everybody commented how stoked they were on Howling leading this episode, right? Like everybody gave him raving reviews. I'm not going to do it to you.
Look
Don't
at him
worry, Howling.
panic.
No, don't worry. I'm not going to do it to you. However, in the theme of allowing the other host to finally host their episode like they were supposed to, I'm going to kick this off to Stony. Stony, give the fans what they want. Please lead this episode.
I've really tried to stay out of this light for quite a while, so apologize up ahead of time if it goes a little clunky. So yeah, no, I guess this is my contractual obligation at some point. So yeah, there's no preparation on this one, Luna. So thank you for joining.
All right, cool. No, it's all good. We can talk about anything and everything. I mean, I can talk about whatever for forever.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you joining us and sitting down with us. And we were talking a bit ago just about levels of sunshine as we sit here on the Central Coast, and we call it.
Dude, stop embarrassing yourself.
Well, we have a full coastline, and if you look, you can't really see the other side of it.
Don't.
So you can see.
You don't. You have a shoreline. A shoreline.
A shoreline. We've established this.
But you get to join us from a nice sunnier place a little bit further past where the sun is been. So thank you for making some time for us tonight. It's probably still late in the afternoon for you. So appreciate you swinging by. So yeah, I know Howling, once I get him going, like his brain's been working and he's been doing probably as much research as anyone else on this show. But, one of the things that I started tooling around with, and I've heard you talk quite a bit about, that I was really interested about picking your brain around. You talk quite a bit about terroir. And my background in food,
I do.
Yeah, sometimes. It's something that it's on kind of a deeper level. I come from a culinary background, and most of my experience with wine specifically comes from California and Oregon and American wine. So, my framework of learning was around that. And so I've heard you talk about this terroir, and that's one of the things that just kind of circled up in my brain. And so I kind of, I started thinking about these notions where you were talking about, you see kind of the future. I noticed that you mentioned one time that you see a future where we can actually look at cannabis based upon its terroir, and we would actually market it or think about it in those sorts of formats. So kind of cool with that. I'd love to pick your brain around that. I'd love to talk a little bit around kind of the science of what makes it, and then, just kind of those parallels, because I think the entry level for anyone is probably wine, because that word terroir, and that's maybe the first place we can get started, is let's like lay some framework of definition around what terroir is and kind of start there.
Sure. So I understand terroir to be about topographical expression. So a location that allows for expression of a genetic in a very unique way, which is influenced by your environmentals, your light spectrum, just where you're at, latitude, longitude on the planet, as well as soil composition and water quality. And all those different
happens
factors.
In coffee.
Yeah, exactly. It happens in coffee, it happens in tobacco, it happens into all plants actually, but those are the ones that we notice, because we consume them as like fine quality commodities. And so cannabis is another one. And kind of where I've taken that concept is the soil aspect of it, the light spectrum aspect of it, the environmental aspect of it, and somewhat water. We can control indoors and use different approaches to create unique flower, unique end product based on like how we treat our plant and how we build our soils. And you'll have different expressions of even the same phenotype, just based on how you treat your plant and the soil composition and so on. And so that's something that I see I see cannabis going in that direction, maybe eventually, hopefully eventually. And you see it in people talk about it a lot in like Northern California, and Southern Oregon. And that's where I've spent most of my time cultivating. And even from location to location, like farm to farm, different clones expressing themselves differently on different hillsides and on different parts of the town, because the soil composition changes even just from place to place, mile to mile, out there.
Well, and I think that's what's really fascinates me, because as I started understanding wine, I began to understand some of the soil compositions of it, right? So the further south you get, the more sandier, the more drainage that happens to it. There's areas in the coastlines where there's a lot of drainage and there's a lot of foliage that drops down, and so it's a really fertile, kind of moist, dense soil. So certain terpenes are going to express themselves based upon the stress, whether it's water, as just one of the variables of many of them.
Absolutely.
And you cultivated an outdoors, and to be frank, I think that's one of the future aspects that I see in cultivation. I think that has always been kind of the undercurrent, the sort of gray market of the outdoor approach to things on the West Coast. Of course, that's going to take its decade time to get here. But, I think a lot of people are just maybe starting to understand a little bit more about sun-grown or outdoor grown, but I don't know that they know that difference in the soil makeup. So given this sort of barring, like, we don't have these sandy soils as we're down in California, are there other elements, are there other supplements or other ways that you look to express that, and, to kind of circle it back to your indoor approach to things and how you're really kind of beginning to shape soils, and we shape those soils? Is any of that having sort of an influence when you talk about that terroir, like California soil, like Northern California versus Southern California grown?
So just to make sure I understand your question,
Sure.
You're asking how that technique and that mindset kind of affects our indoor approach?
Yeah, how that might leverage, or how you might like bridge that over. So taking that sort of information and knowledge of what those soils do and how they can express, does that impact the way that you do soil mixes and blends?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it comes to, excuse me, I have cats going crazy around me.
No, that only got it going.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's quite a few things that you take in mind when you're considering like soil composition and how it impacts overall genetic expression. It's going to be like your clay content, which contributes to like your cation exchange capacity. I'm going to try to not talk over anyone's head here. I'm going to try to break this down. So we have a few things at play here. I think the first one to go over is going to be our cation exchange capacity, which is the ability for like how many cation sites are inside a soil. So like how many negatively charged like zones, like negatively charged areas in the soil that can hold on to nutrients, because most nutrients are cations. There's are a few that are anions, like ammonium nitrate is an anion. And these are positive and negative charges, right? And so the cation exchange capacity is going to be influenced by your organic matter and your clay content, also things like silt and minerals just in general, okay? So the amount of cation exchange capacity that you have will allow for the density of nutrients that you can introduce into your soil. Those ratios, those variables will impact your genetic expression, okay? On top of that, we have all the different amendments that we can use that will create a unique profile of nutrient ions, as well as, our macro, micro, and trace minerals, okay? However, they also have very unique profiles of enzymes and simple and complex carbohydrates, okay? Which are going to influence the biological diversity that feeds on those inputs, okay? So like, for example, we have insect grass, which is high in chitin. So we're going to need bacteria that breaks down chitin, which is a polysaccharide. It's a complex carbohydrate. It's a sugar.
Well, you can't just like throw shit in a pot. It's got to have a balance. There's got to be
Exactly. And sometimes our, native soils typically lack nitrogen, but over time, as long as humans haven't destroyed it or messed it up too bad, it kind of comes into an equilibrium, balances itself through fungal networks, moving nutrients around and stuff like that. I'm getting a little off base. I'm going to try.
No, you're good. You're right with it. I'm tracking.
there's a lot of different those elements at play also, like including mycorrhizae, fungi, simple and complex fungi, like lower fungi, higher fungi, things like mucor, which will decompose stuff and then form symbiotic relationships. I'm getting way off base. My point being,
you're going into depth, so you're not off base. You're just going into depth. I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. So my point being, every single different thing that you use in your soil is going to change the genetic expression in it. You could analyze and try to determine the nutrient composition and like the amendment profile of a native soil and try to mimic it and bring it into your indoor situation if you would like to. But most of the time, people are just going to be running peat and coco coir, peat and or coco coir. But every little different part of what builds the soil composition is going to impact the way that a plant expresses itself. And that's because of enzymatic. Oh my God, my cats are losing their minds. They know I'm doing something.
Hey, you know what? It's cat ion exchange right there.
Not right.
They're just making nice points to this.
So there's things called cofactors, right? There's cofactors, there's precursors. And these are what biosynthesize our secondary metabolites. These are the building blocks, the key ingredients that will create our aroma compounds, okay? Which are like our terpenes, our phthals, our phenols, our esters, our aldehydes, and so on. And without the correct precursors or cofactors responsible for that biosynthesis, it just won't be present. And that's, sometimes people just don't have good aroma. It could be because, like they're the way that they cured it or dried it or whatever. But a lot of the time it's that the plant lacked the necessary precursors and cofactors to biosynthesize those compounds that were required to create the aromatic profile that the genetic could produce, right? And it's not as simple as like I can change up a certain profile and force the sweet genetic to become gassy. The genetic itself has to have that potential to do so.
Sure. It's the volume of expression.
Yeah, exactly.
So if it has it available, can you boost it then?
Yeah, absolutely. Like if the genetic potential is there, like and then the next question is going to be how?
I think my question was more like, can you specifically, like, if the plant is capable of banana, can you throw something to make it taste like banana in the end, rather than like you normally grow it, everybody normally grows it, and it tastes like lemon and lime? Can you manipulate through the biodiversity in the soil that way?
I'm going to say yes, you can, but how you do it is going to be a more complicated answer. I have a buddy, he grew, this Afghani genetic, and he had this very particular expression that he said he could only get out of the plant when he used high phosphorus seabird guano, or bat guano or something like that. Like, and then once he lost availability to this particular kind of guano that he had, he said that he lost that expression in his genetic forever. And I think that really connects to biology and bacteria that's specific to those inputs. Like guano has a very specific profile of bacteria that you're not going to be able to replicate with like earthworm castings.
Sure.
And then the bacteria itself, they secrete enzymes, and those enzymes can be used as cofactors to then create, those secondary metabolites. And so like, how would I get gassier stuff out of my OG? Unfortunately, I don't know the answer. Because that kind of research hasn't been done. However, right. I would suggest just making sure that all of your bases are covered. Like, obviously balancing things based on soil mineral balancing theory. Everyone knows about the ratios and stuff like that, but also making sure you have your trace minerals, and then maximizing biological diversity with as many different food sources that feed a wide profile of biology.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the things that people seem to miss is a lot of people in our community are natural input organic growers, and they toss, and we come a lot from a lot of us started our journey with things like Build the Soil, which is just toss a bunch of these ingredients, toss these ferments, toss these things, and I don't think we realize how much we could be influencing not just the health of the plant, but the expression of that plant because of the things that we're doing. I mean, I'm just curious that like it's very easy to tell when something is present or not, and maybe you did something to influence that. Do you think that let's say a blueberry type terp comes out of something. I only bring that up because blueberry is my favorite thing. Let and let's say that's going to express itself and it's there. Could we in a noticeable way influence that? Like, of course, lab tests might say some terpenes are going up by a certain percentage, and so it shows as a number. But do you think like we are capable of noticing enough difference in cannabis? I mean, like grapes, of course, when you're making wine, like it can matter quite a bit. I didn't know if like we just could perceive that amount of difference in cannabis.
So is it maybe more that it's the expression, like to go back to what I was saying before, like it's the volume of expression. And I think like these things are going to be there. They're going to be present based on genetic expression, right? And kick me in the shins along the way here, right? So these things are going to be there by genetic expression. Yes, you might have more of an increase in the blueberry because there might not have been as much of a stressor, because a lot of these terpenes have come out of the as a result of stressing the plant, right? So through drainage, through soil. Jump in. Yep, jump in.
Yeah, let me touch on that. Stressors trigger certain metabolic processes, and they biosynthesize organic acids and phytohormones in response to stressors. We can introduce those phytohormones and those organic acids that are associated with stress without stressing our plant and stuff like that. Like methyl jasmonate or jasmonic acid is the response that a plant has after it's been masticated. So this is an evolutionary trait that was adopted to a plant being eaten by an animal. And it gets like this once the cells are masticated, they get like munched on. The plant starts biosynthesizing methyl jasmonate, and it's an immune system like response, like a plant growth response. And it makes the plant grow really fast to try to survive, because it's like, if I keep getting eaten like this, I'm gonna just die. So it like boosts their growth rate. And we can harness that organic acid that acts as a phytohormone and introduce it to our plants. And that's one of the really cool benefits of playing with living soil, is that we can integrate plants that have potency and density of organic acids and phytohormones inside them, and then introduce them to our root zone. There is also some, just to touch on what Howling said, there is some anecdotal evidence, and some people disagree with me, where introducing the plant that itself, the plant itself that carries characteristics that we're going for, introducing it to the root zone can provide the foundation of enzymes and cofactors and stuff to promote that aroma. It's not that it's like absorbing the aroma and then putting it through the flowers. Yeah.
To make a point on that,
Your mic came
isn't that
unplugged.
the? Oh shit! Hold on, is that fixed better? Anywho, how's that better?
No.
Go ahead and ask your question, man.
Oh, okay. So, isn't that the entire reason why when you do sprouted seed teas, like I'm a really big firm believer in sprouted seed teas. It's one of my primary inputs, and the reason that I thought that you do multiple different seed varieties is to introduce different enzymes, right? And you tend to choose the characteristics you're looking for, right? Like, so if it's a quick growing grass, you would think, okay, that's great as an input for veg or something like that. So isn't that kind of playing on that same theory, that if you want this characteristic and you introduce it to its root zone? To me, that's kind of the same theory.
That's kind of like definitely. And that's kind of like the intuitive approach behind it. And this kind of idea was I feel like originally introduced through like Japanese farming, which then became Korean natural farming, where like you harness the characteristic of a plant and you introduce it to your plant to then take on those characteristics. And some people do that by osmotic extraction, which is just mixing with like brown sugar, or I like to blend and strain stuff personally. Some people like to throw them in an FPE, let the lactobacillus kind of break it down, do like a lactobacillus based ferment. And they all have their reasons to why one might work better than the other. But I'll do all three. So yes, you're right. Like one of the big ones for me that I've used, that I've noticed like a really drastic vegetative growth response to, was bamboo, which is the fastest growing plant in the world. If you take like bamboo shoots and you chop them at the base, like on like a big bamboo, and you chop it up and you mix it with brown sugar. You let it sit for 5 days, and then you strain the liquid out of it and you use it. Your plants have an explosive growth rate from it. It's really unbelievable, actually. On one of my outdoor projects, I did a lot of premature blackberry ferments, and a lot of my genetics, they have like berry expressions, like blueberry, raspberry, stuff like that. And I introduced it to my plants, to the root zone. I watered it in with like a compost tea, and I got really great berry, raspberry, blueberry. It's hard to say whether or not that was why, because I didn't do any side-by-sides, and my genetics tend to do that anyway. And I had really good soil, and I was treating it all very well. But yeah, we can adopt characteristics of other plants, just kind of rule of thumb. I'm not going to say that that's always going to work. That's always going to happen. People are talking about like, you take a big fruit, and you chop it up and then it'll make your buds get bigger. Like, I'm not necessarily saying that that's going to happen. You can't just force something to take on the exact characteristics of something else. And it really comes down to the phytohormone profile of whatever it is that you're integrating. So like one that people do is alfalfa seed teas, right?
Mhm.
Which has, oh my God, my cats, which has a lot of triacontanol and like auxin in it, which will make your plant grow really fast in the vegetative stage, right? But then there's other ones like gibberellins, cytokinins, and ethylene. And, you use plants with a lot of ethylene, which is like a ripening hormone. It's supposed to help your plant ripen faster if that's what you want. So I'd say it's more about chasing like phytohormone profiles, but typically if you have a high density of that phytohormone in the plant, it's going to have that characteristic in the plant that you're harnessing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, is there anyone doing kind of like that side-by-side comparisons of different inputs to affect expression that, like, because I mean, now I'm just wanting to nerd out on this and see who is doing, like, taking cuts of clones and just
That would be cool to see.
and trying to express it. You have the same plant expressed in different ways depending on what treatment they got.
Right. It's tough because so many people are going after production and yield. And so like they usually do whatever they're doing to everything that they do.
Yeah.
I know that Build a Soil is doing that. What's that guy's name? Cannabis Luke is doing some side-by-side stuff. I've never really gotten huge into side-by-side. The only side-by-side stuff I've done is like testing lights. But I'm sure that there's someone out there, and then like, but do they want to share that information? And
Yeah.
There's also a lot of factors, like how do we know that this thing has this high level of phytohormones, without doing like some really expensive testing? And
that's where I was going with it.
hard.
Is like, how are they analyzing it? I mean, are they just giving it like kind of it's smell test approval, or is there any sort of deep analytics that are happening with it?
Right, absolutely. And a lot of the time, a lot of our aroma profile aren't even terpenes, and all we test
Right.
for are THC and terpene profiles, when like the skunk aroma isn't a terpene. Like a lot of the aroma that we get from cannabis is thiols, and no one tests for thiols. So it's hard to say. I don't think we're there yet. The living soil hasn't taken off enough, because it's just not. I think it's easier because I know how it works, but a lot of people find it more complicated.
Well, one of the things that we preach on this podcast is that living soil is the lazy way, in our opinion, right?
Sure.
Like it's if once you get over the initial, like, and by no means am I trying to say I know even a little of what you do, but once you get over the initial, like, intimidating, I guess, like, verbiage sometimes, it kind of makes sense, and then you can be extremely lazy about it. You can either get as into it and as detailed as you want. Like I said, I make a lot of different sprouted seed teas just because it's fun for me, right? And I do see benefits, but you can also not and still get a yield. And so we try and preach that it's simple, because I think a lot of people get worked up over it and it's just intimidating.
Yeah.
And I think if they listen to people like you, it gets a lot easier. So I do appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I don't know if I help to not intimidate people when I talk about shit like that. But and there's a very valid discussion surrounding, you just build the soil, you balance it, and the biology will break down the inputs. It'll create a diversity on its own, and all you have to do is water it, and everything else is extra. And you can absolutely just water only a living soil and pull fireweed. Like you can just go buy a fully built water only mix, throw it in a pot, and only water it. Don't water it to runoff, but like keep it saturated consistently the whole run, and that's it. You don't have to check your profiles. Sorry. What?
The analogy that I use is I said a buffet, because I've grown in living soil along the way and messed around with different supplemental ways to feed it, but it's always been living soil. And I was kind of make the analogy of a buffet. As a chef, if I have this buffet is laid out for everything that the plant needs and wants, and it's always going to go up, because some days it's going to want to choose a big chunk of meat because it needs certain things. Other days it's going to want to go and choose this or that or the other for whatever reason it wants to. But if the buffet is always set for it, you just kind of get out of the way and let the plant do its magic. And as long as you keep that moisture content going, you've got that exchange going, right? You've got, the plant, it's kind of like a farmer's market, right? The plant's walking down the aisles of the farmer's market, stopping at each one and saying, hey, I need this. And there's this communication that happens. And that's like that cation exchange. It's like, hey, here's my message, right? This is what I need for it. And instead of just like making the choice, the vendor on the other side looks at it and says, okay, here's what you need. And so if it's all in broken down formats, if you as you were saying earlier, I'll circle back to all of those elements that go into it. Effectively, it all gets chewed down to smaller and smaller bits to make it more and more bioavailable. And as long as you've got great bioavailability, as long as you've got the moisture there so that the exchange can happen and the communication that can happen, if you set the farmer's market and you set the buffet, your plants will do the work for it.
It will. Absolutely. It definitely does too. Because the plant, it doesn't communicate, but it passively signals different processes within the root zone through root exudates, right? So
it does communicate. We just don't know how to fucking read it.
Yeah, for sure. Like as the plant grows and throughout its life cycle, the root exudate profile changes, and that it allows for different biochemical reactions to happen that'll make specific profiles of nutrients available for that stage that it needs it in. That doesn't happen as much in hydroponic because everything is being fed to it. You are feeding the plant, right? While this way we're feeding the soil, and the plant interacts with interacts with the soil in a way to take up and consume what it needs when it needs it. And
because the other end of the spectrum is you're wearing an IV or you've got a feeding tube instead of this buffet where you can have whatever you want from it. You've got a feeding tube and it's told exactly what nutrients it's going to get at a certain point, and that may not be what that plant needs at that time.
And isn't that what we're kind of doing with, or maybe helping along with some of the inputs we use, like FPEs or like how I know that you really like to use beets and blended up beets and a lot of things. Is that a way to, like, we are trying to mimic what the plant could have signaled, and we are giving it to the soil to try to promote something that the plant wasn't already doing, but we're kind of helping it along a little bit. Isn't that like what we're trying to do by picking beets, or like maybe the different types of things we put into sprouted teas and such, is that we are trying to give that soil something the plant could have done on its own, but we're just kind of helping it along, amping it up a little bit to promote something. So
yeah, absolutely.
So I think
it sometimes feels like we feed bacteria.
That's what it's
doing.
That's what I was going to get at too.
Right.
Was one of the main reasons why I like using red beets is because of its prebiotic profile. It has a lot of different compounds that are prebiotics, right? Like inulin. I'd have to go through and read it. I don't remember all of them, but it has a bunch of different compounds that are prebiotic, right? It's going to feed like a very wide diversity of biology. This was something that I stumbled upon making kombucha back in the day. I was playing with like different additives and like juices to add to kombucha to see which ones created the most carbonation. And beet was always the one that made the most. And I was like, wow, this is cool. And I looked into it, and it has all these different prebiotic compounds in them. And I started adding it to my soil, and I noticed a massive increase in plant health. And so that kind of led me down this road of like polysaccharides, right? And like how polysaccharides influence biological diversity, and they feed specific profiles of microbiology. And now one of the big things that I do is I'm like doing diversity of food sources, diversity of amino acids, and diversity of enzymes. And that's like what I do most of the time. Like I definitely do my top processes and stuff, but I'm focusing on like biological diversity the whole time.
Yeah, and to build on that, the beets themselves have a very, very simple sugar, right? And so that's a great way to kind of make it analogous for a lot of folks when we talk about the chemical breakdown. It's the simple sugars of it, right? Versus something like a molasses that takes a little bit more time to eat up. Coconut sugar takes even longer to eat up. So if you're feeding your bacteria on a slower or faster pace, you can play around with those different sugars, right? Yeah, I saw the finger go.
So yes and no. So it has both. It has simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. So our polysaccharides are our complex carbohydrates, and then like our glucose and like sucrose, I believe, are like simple simple sugars, right? And so it has both of them. And the ones that take longer to break down doesn't mean that it's bad that it's taking longer to break down. It means that it gives them consistent food source over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
Like chitin, right?
Right.
While if we hit them with like just straight, table sugar, like baking sugar, we're going to see our bacteria do this. It's going to spike. It's going to peak.
It's the same thing. Yeah, just like humans, right? If we eat corn syrup, we're going to get this sugar spike, and then it's going to crash out. But if we eat honey, if we eat these slower sugars, it takes longer for it, right? Molasses is,
Exactly.
So those sugars, to circle back to that, the bacteria, is because effectively those bacteria are being fed. The more that they colonize, the more that they can eat and break down different elements from your soil, making it more bioavailable, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that was one of the eye-opening things was as I went down this rabbit hole and I discovered, like, I caught your content where you were using beets, and at first I didn't know it was beets. I was like, what the hell is she pouring into this thing? And then that's how I like explored more, found the Discord, and I found some of the recipes for your teas, and I think that's one of the things I was pretty surprised about is like a lot of us are used to making teas with molasses. And I think the only one with molasses that I've come across is your anaerobic terp booster thing. Like, I think that may be the only one, and everything else it's beets. And so I was like, where the hell's the molasses? And then it's like, that was a rabbit hole of learning, like, hey, dumbass, there's more sugars than molasses. And so that was pretty eye-opening for us. And I think that's where you said earlier, like, living soil, I mean, sometimes this can get complex, but I think for us, like, people come in, they're like, I can never grow organically. I'm like, no, listen, you get yourself like a 15-gallon pot with a good soil, water the damn thing. You're going to have an awesome plant in the end. I think where it gets complex is, okay, you want to use that again. Oh, you want some other expression. You want to refeed this thing. You want to give more back to the soil. I think that's where it starts becoming a little daunting. And I think for people, I'm interested if you have a general recommendation. Like, for me, I'm just a shotgun. I go all over the place. You've seen me in the Discord, ask like a bunch of different questions. I'm all over the damn place with it. That's chaotic. I'm wondering for a person that's, hey, they've gotten their win with their water only good living soil grow. What do you think for them would be the next step of trying to bridge that gap between, you're on one end of the spectrum of what you know, and then there's just the water only grower. How do they like start migrating that way and taking the next step? What would you think would be the next rabbit hole?
Well, I mean, they may not even need to.
Yeah.
I think that if you want a solid foundation of how to grow living soil and organically, if you want to jump into soil mineral balancing theory, that's going to be the thing. That piece of information, understanding how that works, you can now create any native soil or soil mix that you want and know how to dial it in, and then use it over and over and re-amend it in the correct proportions to just continue growing water only. However, you really got to focus on biology too, and keep in mind that this whole system functions on bacteria and protozoa, as well as root exudates, and just all soil food web stuff. So soil mineral balancing theory leading into the soil food web information. If you got those two things like locked down, you're good to go. And I know that may seem like, oh, yeah, that's simple, and they can be really complicated, but you can also just have other people do it for you. You can have tests run, and then ask for recommendations. So when you say like move to the other end of the spectrum,
well, I mean, it's just like once they've gone water only, but they really want to dive more into like the soil food web, natural inputs, doing these things that you've learned, like you've learned the composition of things like beets and what it could contribute. And a lot of people don't. Like they see that and be like, what the hell are you adding? What it would be the next step to trying to start understanding these things, and maybe not go so much as like looking up phytohormone databases and looking up at mineral theories and balancing their own soil like that eventually they'll get to. But I'm wondering if there is just a baby step after that like Rev said, he does like sprouted seed teas. Like we follow like a lot of people. Some people are very curious and they'll go all over the place. Some people do like that recipe format of like, okay, go learn this next thing, and that'll give you the next win after that. And I'm just curious if, like, for a beginner, what that might be.
Next step after water only.
Yeah. Like, is it then learning how to make your own castings? It's your own ferments? Is it learning?
I think it's really open-ended. I think that people should just go in whatever direction they're most interested in.
Yeah, all right.
And sometimes people want to jump to K&F. That typically is like the thing that people get excited about. And they start, fermenting stuff and then adding it to their soil. I think that that's really kind of like jumping to dessert, kind of. When I really do think that the next thing is mineral balancing theory.
Okay.
If you really want to go into the next thing, playing with sprouted CTs, fermentations and stuff like that is fun, and you should learn how to do it, and have a little bit of dessert to keep you motivated, and play with it and have fun and stuff like that. But soil mineral balancing theory is the one. So this book, this one breaks it down really easy. The Intelligent Gardener.
Okay.
This one's a really good book. And it has.
I've actually gotten to like chapter 3 a couple different times. I have to start over every time, but yeah.
Look, it goes through some history and some things that you don't necessarily need to know.
Steve Solomon, right?
Yeah, Steve Solomon. Yeah. And it has, like tables, breaks down of like how you would balance the soil. It like helps walk you through it and stuff like that. I think it's funny. I have a picture of me and my mom in my weed grow.
How fitting.
But the teaming with microbes, teaming with fungi, teaming with nutrient books, those are also really good ones. I have those over there as well.
I did really well with those with audio. They do break it down pretty. That's where I've got a good basis of it. And I think you had a good point of like, it is a good place to start with just understanding, and that comes like a cooking background. And I think maybe that's the tie-in that I was going to talk a little bit about, was that some people just want to get in and make the recipe. Like they don't want to know about the ingredients. They don't need to know the food science that happens behind it. I get that a lot, and so maybe that is the jump. Is that they know they're doing something fun, and this is part that they can have an impact on. You
don't have to know how to change the tires to drive the car.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And like I don't, need to be a mechanic to drive a car, to own a car. But I do need to take my car to the mechanic so that I can continue to drive my car. And so, I mean, if you do want to follow recipes and stuff, there's plenty of people that, put them out, me being one of them.
Yeah.
Like on my Patreon, I have all my recipes and stuff like that. And I map out what I do, when and why. And so that would be kind of a way to do it, is like find someone that you trust or that you're interested in their techniques and, collaborate with them, like ask them questions.
And I think that to go back to that, you said when and why, and that made me spark up, because I think that that's the importance of someone who is looking to pass on knowledge and education, right? Because there's people that can say, okay, we'll just do this. Here's the formula. You don't need to know anything about it. But it seems to me that you'd rather people understand when and how to do this and what's going into it, and have a better understanding for it. And that's where some people, as Howling calls it, and I like to, it works well, nerd out on it, right? it was fascinating for me to just gain understanding because I could see it on a different level. I work in an analogous mind. You know what? I need to make these sort of analogies in my brain to make them make more sense because it is very complex. It is way more, and I think, but that entry level, that sort of gateway into living soil, because once they've bought it, then there's like that. I think there's a certain sense of ownership. Like there's a pride level of like, okay, I'm now nurturing my soil in a different way. This is something more important than just the dirt out in my backyard. So for a lot of first-time growers that are just getting into it, and then they hear they can start making potions and powders and shit,
Yeah.
and making
Yeah,
shit
cool.
really cool, and it's gonna make
Yeah,
it better, and it's fucking cheap, and then they're like,
Great.
this is awesome. And to your point, there's a lot that they just don't get to, and it is easy to fall into a nutrient line program of it
Right.
without an understanding of it. And I think that's maybe where you separate a bit.
Absolutely. And that's that's one of the reasons why I say that like KNF is like dessert and like fermentations are like dessert, because while it's really fun and exciting and you're like, holy shit, I can ferment bamboo to create, to harness growth hormones that make my plant grow faster. I'm going to water the shit out of my veg plants with bamboo, and you overdose it on oxygen and it dies. And then you're like, screw this living soil shit. Like, I don't want to do it. And you can do that with, you can do that with ethylene. You can do that with too many enzymes. When I first got started, like playing with KNF stuff, I did exactly that. I was like, I heard this whole, you harness the size of a plant or the size of a fruit, and that means it has more growth hormones and blah blah blah. And I was like, oh fuck yeah, I'm gonna ferment. Sorry, I hope I can swear on your podcast.
You heard me blast it out,
dude.
so you're totally
we
good.
have zero standards on this motherfucker. You can
you're average with us, Luna. Sorry, you're this far into it. So
all right, cool.
We held ourselves professional for the first 40 minutes. We're good to fucking go. Roll it out.
Let's go. So I was like, fuck yeah, like pineapples and papayas and mangoes, I was like, I'm just going to ferment the shit out of all of them. You're supposed to separate it too. And so I made like separate ferments of pineapple, papaya, and mango, which are all super high in enzymes, right? And pineapple specifically has bromelain in it, which is a protease, a proteolytic enzyme. It breaks down proteins, literally into mush. And I did like double the fucking dose that I was supposed to, because I was like, we're in flower, like let's pump these babies, like blah blah blah. And I water in this this concoction of all these big fruit ferment. I water it into my soil, and I leave the grow for the night, and I come back the next day. And I don't mean they were sad; they were fucking dead. They were dead.
Yeah, their roots were dissolved, probably.
It
right?
did. The roots dissolved. I grabbed the plant, and it just came out
like mush.
And the roots, I touched them, and they just broke away into nothing. Right. They had completely dissolved. And like I looked through the soil, the worms are all dead. Whoa. I killed all the worms. I killed all the plants. I completely destroyed the entire run just by watering in ferments.
That's a hell of an introduction.
Just like us.
and so that's why I'm like, learn about minerals first.
Understand your soil.
Yes. Right, like how it functions. And don't get too excited because my original foundation was with hydroponics, and then I moved into living soil, and then I was kind of like, we have more nutrients and everything's going to get bigger, and like we give them more growth hormones, they're all going to get bigger. It's like, no, it does not work that way. And if you introduce the wrong growth hormone at the wrong stage, you create problems. You can have elongated buds. You can get all mutated and like spindly and weird. You can lose density. And so this is where people are like, wow, this sounds really complicated and not worth it. And like, I'm going to stick to hydro, which is why I'm like, don't jump to dessert,
okay.
Like, and if you do, eat a little dessert, eat a little bit of dessert. You don't eat the whole birthday cake. You have a slice of birthday cake.
Well, let's circle back to the
you
bacteria.
Can't blame the fork for making you fat, right? So you have to actually take some self-control and realize. I know it's very hard because I push alfalfa and like barley too. And I was telling people do alfalfa, and people were going ham with alfalfa, even though I was like, hey, you got to use significantly less alfalfa than you do for anything else. And they were like, oh, it burnt the shit out of my plants. And I was like, well, how much alfalfa did you use? And they'd be like, oh, like a full cup or so. And I'd be like, well, okay. Like, do you see the problem? Like, I get it. It can be overwhelming, but you got to understand there are some things you have to be a little careful with. Like, you don't have to be that careful, just a little bit.
Well, I think worm teas are probably a good entry level potion for folks, right? Because you're just, I do vermicompost, and there's tons of cocoons in there. There's tons of bark and other minerals and that sort of stuff that are in it. And I brew it pretty regularly, and it's a fairly simple. It's one where, like, if you want to feel like you're brewing a potion of something, you just make a worm tea, right? These guys have been doing worms for years now, worm farming and all the nectar that comes out of them. Yeah, and I get the vermicompost here in the Central Coast, so it's see no Central Coast. There is. But so let's go back to like the bacteria and feeding some of the bacteria, because I think that's one of the things that has been central. We've talked about it a few times and pulled this thread a few times around the bacteria, because I think that is one area that is maybe entry level as we start to think about KNF, because as to your point, you can go pretty far down some of the ferments and fermenting different things, and you can run some risks into it. But back to that bacteria and sort of worm teas. So what are your thoughts on worm teas? Do you brew that potion?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, teas were like the first thing that I got like really known for. Using like oat flour and beet juice. I had like a kind of unique approach to using teas, which I don't even really use teas that much anymore. Teas are everything that we have in like living soil, like sprouted seed teas, vermicompost teas, these different ferments. They're all different tools that are very applicable in different sort of situations. I was growing in a really big greenhouse where half of the soil that I had was very dry, very hydrophobic, and very low on biology. And so making a high bacterial dense compost tea was a great solution instead of getting a ton of compost or earthworm castings to introduce biology. And so I would make, I got a conical brewer, like a 150-gallon conical brewer, and I'd fill it up and I'd make these huge teas, and then I'd spread them around everywhere. Compost teas are a great way to introduce biology. And with compost teas, you can, like, based on how long you let the compost tea go, or the vermicompost tea, earthworm casting tea, will determine the biological profile of bacteria versus protozoa. So this is now soil food web sciences, right? Compost teas are great for tailoring based on your soil food web profile. So something that was going on with me with this run that I did in my tent that I'm doing right now, I introduced a whole bunch of companion plants, right? I have a thick layer of alyssum. And when you have a density, like a strong density of roots in like a concentration, they're secreting a lot of root exudates. And so they feed a lot of bacteria, but you're on an aerobic layer of the soil. And so your concentration or your density of protozoa gets a lot higher. Protozoa are, I think it's Latin or Greek or something for first animal. Like they have supposedly evolved from bacteria into, very small single-celled organisms, right? Actually, they're not single-celled. I'm sorry, excuse me. But we have like our ciliates, our flagellates, our rotifers, our amoebas, our nematodes, and they all have roles where they consume bacteria that's broken down organic matter, and by consuming them and then having their excretion, by pooping them out, they've changed the chemical composition of whatever nutrient that bacteria broke down to make it more readily available to the plant. Okay, so I had this density of alyssum, and so I had a really high ciliate count. And so I know that if I have a high ciliate count on the surface of my soil, I can pump it with bacteria, and that'll increase my organic matter breakdown and my nutrient availability, my amendment top dress availability super quickly, which is one of the great reasons to have like companion plants and stuff like that. So yes, like I love using compost teas. So in this instance, I made a high bacterial dense compost tea, which was a shorter brew between about 20 to 24 hours, because the longer you let it go, different organisms will come in and start to eat that bacteria. So I made a high bacterial dense compost tea and I introduced it to my soil. My plants loved it. But in other situations, you may see that you don't have any ciliates, but you have a ton of bacteria, or you may see that you don't have enough bacteria. You can add a bacterial dense tea, increase your bacterial density, and then add a second tea after you tailor it. You let it go a little bit longer. You let it go between 30 and 36 hours, and you have higher protozoa populations. And usually it's just ciliates. And then you can introduce that diversity of ciliates to your soil, and now you're nutrient cycling faster. Okay.
So hang on, I want to make sure I'm understanding this. So if I'm hearing correct, so you're saying is it even possible? So you start a brew, and at 20 to 24 hours, you pull off 50% of that brew, water that into your right, and then you wait for that remainder hour, and now you've further developed the protozoa.
Yep.
So what would have gone slower in the pot, like it would have done that, you've now accelerated that process because you've given it. Do you redose with any sort of sugars over that hour period, or that like once you pass that 2024, you're just keep the brew running and let the protozoa form?
Yeah. And so since protozoa are kind of like responsible for like the end portion of like our nutrient cycling and stuff like that, if I have like a high protozoa tea, that's when I could add like not liquid, but just soluble amendments, right? They can be like a powder that's soluble, or a liquid too, that has like more nutrients in it, and then it'll make it more effective. It'll be quicker. It'll be more quickly available to the plant. So I do that with aloe vera. In some of my recipes, I'm like, post brew, add aloe vera or add corn seed powder or both or whatever, and it increases the effectiveness of whatever I'm adding at the end.
So you could just take a powder form like of are you sprouting the blue seed corn, the blue corn seed? Right.
So I gotta
just taking a dry seed.
So no, I'm not using a dry seed. So when the sprouted seed tea that I still integrate sometimes, and I actually need to do it just because I've just been lazy, is barley. Because of the phosphatases. Phosphorus is the really tricky one in living soil. And phosphatases will break down phosphorus. And phosphorus is a little bit more difficult because we have like fish bone meal or just bone meal in general, where the phosphorus isn't very quickly readily available. And then we have we can get like micronized rock phosphate, calcium phosphate. And that'll be a little bit more readily available, but you risk like heavy metal contamination with like arsenic, or I think arsenic's the big one, and so there's always a trade-off. But phosphorus is kind of difficult in living soil situations. So let's say we do use like fish bone meal, adding phosphatases enzyme, potent in a barley sprouted seed tea, will really help us at the end. But also you can use companion plants that have high phosphatase levels of enzymes in the root exudates, like buckwheat, which is what I ran on my big outdoor plants.
So just grew right along the way. Did you chop and drop, or did you harvest out the?
No, I just let it go, because I want the root zone to be active. So I just let the plants live. You can chop and drop if you want. Some people, I think that chop and dropping makes the most sense to me when you just need to prune up your space, because like the plant matter is actually getting in the way and like causing issues. If it's infested, which actually you should probably just remove it. There is some benefit to, like, if you have soil compaction, you run your cover crops, you chop it, and then the roots, as they die, they create like aeration channels in the soil. Or you sprout them, you let them just be pretty small, because germinated seeds are really high in enzymes, which is one of the reasons why we use sprouted seed teas, that you could grow a cover crop just a little bit until it's pretty small, but it's still like soft tissue, and you mulch it, like till it back into the soil, like lightly till it, and then that breaks down. You add a whole bunch of enzymes to your soil. So it depends on what you need. And I know
so one of the things that I do late is, in the beginnings, it's blue corn, and I'll actually put that in with the in the pouch, the sachet, with the vermicompost.
Cool.
So I'll let that go all night long. And then in the latter part, and once I get into flowers, I'll take the gnarly barley and I just put it into a blender and powderize it. So
Beautiful.
I take it,
Yeah.
and just break it all the way down. So I do the same thing with the blue. I used to sprout it, and then I just began to think like, okay, all of that stuff is there anyways. It's not magically creating it. So just
You know
turning
what
and
I got
powdering
for
it.
Christmas, Stoney? Megan bought me a 5-pound bag of malted barley
Nice.
because that is what I primarily top dress with my
Yeah.
that and my own worm castings.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've never been so excited to get a big bag of fucking barley, but I was like, hell yeah, man, I'm set for so long.
So, we're tying together the loop here of, the reason that we're using these in the latter part of it is that it helps to break down and bring out that potassium. And, that's one of the expressions that we do along the way that will help to push these terpenes that we've been talking about. And that, kind of takes us all the way back to the beginning of that conversation. Like, these are the ways, and, kick me in the shins along the way, but these are the ways that we're going to make these plants express the aromas that may be there genetically, but there may be other things that are kind of surrounding it, and the aromas and the terpenes that are there, but it's going to help these things to come out better, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go with that time.
Now, Rev, you said you got a big bag of malted barley.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that is there any detriment of using something that's already been malted? I mean, I know about the process of it, but it's usually then bagged and stored that way for a while versus using something fresh like you actually sprouted the barley seeds yourself.
I used to sprout my own barley seeds. In fact, I still have a bunch of the sprouted barley, or the seeds for sprouting of barley and other. However, I was reading something that Coots wrote, and he recommended to get the malted barley because of the enzymes. And it was like I don't remember the comparison to fresh off the top of my head, but he recommended going with the malted barley instead of the sprouting it yourself every time. And he's a lot smarter than I am, so I tend to follow intelligence.
Well, fill that picture a little bit, because that's kind of where I was going with it, and I was going to start to ask that question: is the sprouting versus just using the seed, how does that weigh? Do you have any thoughts or perspective on that? Like, whether or not is there a big advantage to sprouting the seed versus just grinding it and powderizing it?
So if I may be wrong, but I believe that malted barley is just sprouted barley that's ground up and then dried.
Yep.
So I mean, would there,
or if there's something done to it when it gets sprouted, right? They halt the process, and they halt the process with parabol. No, that can't be right. But yes, it's essentially just sprouted barley.
You're invoking my home brewing background.
Yes, I was going to say that was the secret. That was one of the things that home brewing brought to the attention of at least me.
That's why I was wondering, is because malted barley, it's done at a certain temperature for a certain length of time, and there's like doneness to it, and it tries to invoke a certain enzyme profile that when you're brewing beer unlocks and breaks down carbohydrates. And so I just didn't know if the same, like if you went to a brew shop and you buy, I know people do it. I was just curious how much of it's different that you buy barley that has been malted for home brewing or brewing beer versus you want to invoke something in the soil. I didn't know how different, because at different stages you get different enzyme profiles. You have to start germinating the seed. That's what kicks off this process of creating those enzymes and everything there. And then they halt it, but they're doing it for beer. Like, they have a very particular goal. I didn't know how different that was than if we were just sprouting seeds at home and stopping it.
So I think using the sprouted or malted is going to be more effective than using just the seed.
Yeah.
Just the seed, you're probably just going to be getting a lot of the starches off of it, and integrating like the carbohydrate. You're getting hair all over me. See you later, bud. You're going to just get a lot of like the starches and like sugars off the seed and stuff like that. But once it's sprouted and started germinating is when like enzymatic activity starts to peak. And different seeds will have a different peak date of enzymatic activity. You can just look it up. You can just look for like peak enzymatic activity for alfalfa, barley, corn. And if you're after those enzymes, that's when you want to use it. But sometimes we're after the phytohormones, right? And that's when they start to develop like chlorophyll, just like a bit, is when they're going to have higher like phytohormone density. So it's like whatever you need. So like let's say you, for your situation, so you're adding corn, you're going to be getting a lot of the starch off the corn. You've now soaked it. I would then take that corn and then sprout it. And if you want, take half of it and sprout it, blend it up at peak enzymatic activity, introduce it to your soil, and then let the other ones go longer until it starts to get like some more chlorophyll density to it. Blend that up and add it too. You know what I mean? And now you've inoculated.
Stage cycling. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
I like that concept. I've heard that a few times now from you. Right?
Oh yeah.
I love that.
And you can and now you're inoculating the seed with your compostie too. So it has a whole bunch of biology in it already.
Right.
And then that biology is gonna multiply inside of whatever you're sprouting your seeds in. And
I dig that. Yeah, two major keys there. So vermicompost, I think one of the things that takeaways for me was that you can go longer, because there's always that fear of, don't take it longer than 24 hours. It's going to go bad. It'll be anaerobic and you don't want to mess around. It's too dangerous to go into that range, like just 24. But hearing that stage cycling, like, make an amount, pull 50% of it off, go ahead and drench it, let it go for longer. And you're just basically accelerating the same bacterial profile, the same protozoa profile that's in that same drench that you put. You're now just stacking it. So you're exponentially adding more into it, because it's going to continue to grow. And then I'm hearing the same thing about your approach to making these different teas is that, hey, make a tea and then let it go longer, or let it ferment longer, or let it sprout longer and develop into a different stage of its life cycle. Then puree it and add that into it, because you're going to get it a few days later. And I think that's a concept that that's a new one to me. So
isn't that cool?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Another thing that you could do too is so I've never actually done this, but I have friends that have done it. Oh my God, I probably shouldn't preface things with that statement. Anyway, but you can do almost like a DWC type situation, where you have like your sprouts on the surface of the water level, and then oxygenate it with like an air stone and let it grow its roots into the water. And then as it's growing into it, you kind of just let it grow in like a bubbling environment, like over time, like, 5, 6, 7 days, 8 days, whatever, maybe even 10. And you're actually creating a really high concentration of root egg states in that water.
Yeah.
And take that water and you put it on your soil, and it's just full of amino acids, enzymes, carbohydrates, and it'll just increase your nutrient cycling as well. Is that cool?
That's super cool.
I got the stuff to do it, but I never actually got around to doing it. I should do it.
So maybe this is the inspiration for you to do it then.
Yeah, maybe I should do it with barley, because I'm at the stage where I need more phosphatases. So
I think that would be a pretty cool thing to sort through. I'm sure people on here, especially after hearing that, would dig that. I think you've opened up a lot of eyes to living soil and in our community. We're just a bunch of your average growers, but I appreciate you digging your brain and picking it pretty clean. Well, I guess we didn't even start to pick it clean. I bet you could have gone on for hours and hours and hours, but
we could talk. I've done 3-hour podcasts before.
Well, yeah, contractually, they only make me do this for 1 hour out of the time. 1 hour. So hopefully I did all right, but
you did great.
Because now I get to turn it over to Rev, and he gets to ask the fun questions. Fuck yeah, you're going right back at you, dude. If you're gonna toss it in my lap,
No, I'm fine with that. I was trying to say I do have some more questions.
Rattle on.
If you wanted to weasel out, but
I'll weasel right back in, dude. Go right ahead. Keep the flow.
No, I'm good. One of the questions I wanted to ask is, first, what made you fall in love with living soil? And the second one is a completely different topic, so it's super weird that I ask, but I grow a lot of outdoor containers on my patio that are specific to support my indoor garden. And I recommend it for a lot of people, like comfrey, like aloe, just basic stuff. Is there any specific plant that you would recommend, or multiple plants?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, beets are one of them. People know that they love beet. Aloe
Any
vera.
variety or just
So this last time what was it called? I did the Detroit beefcake or some shit. And then it was like ox blood or something like that. I don't know, man. But just like any beet, really, honestly, like sweet beets, red beets, are gonna have a bunch of prebiotics in it. I wouldn't get too into the minutia of like which species of beet, but if you want to plant a whole bunch of different kinds, I'm sure that they all have their own benefits and strengths and weaknesses. But I usually just red beet is what I've been doing. I forget the names. I wrote it. I put it in my Discord the other day when someone asked me, and now I forgot what they are because they haven't been in front of my face for a minute. But just red beet is what
Can
I'm
you
going
grow
for.
those in a pot?
Yeah, you can grow.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're pretty
they
easy to
grow
grow. We used to
quick,
grow them down
too,
the
yeah.
side. Yeah, we used to do succession
Oh,
planting.
are they like
on
a
the
big
farm.
ass radish essentially?
Pretty much.
Yeah, we used to do them like
Yeah.
succession planting, so they would grow down the sides of like cabbage or different lettuces or whatever, and we would kind of cycle them in and out. But we did like reds, yellows, the big chayogas, which is it got me thinking when you were talking about the beets and wondering about all those the polysaccharides and the different complex sugars that are in there, simple sugars as well. Like the bigger the beet, the better, or because I come from the culinary background, we like them nice and tender and sweet and young. But I can imagine that the older that they are, the bigger, more developed that they are, they're probably more nutrient dense. Is that a good assumption?
I think that you were probably right with the kind of culinary approach where you want them like tender and like smaller, sweeter, juicier. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they can get like firm and not very juicy, like the larger that they get. And I grew my beets in my living soil pot with my cannabis.
Would you do that again?
Probably not.
I'll take that pause as a probably not.
They grew so quickly that maybe if I timed it differently, but I planted my beet and my alyssum before my sprouted cannabis seeds because I just assumed that the cannabis was going to grow faster than them because it's such a fast growing plant. And the alyssum and the beet they just got huge, like super quick. They germinated very quickly, and they just got massive, and they were growing at like the same rate that the cannabis was in this soil.
Consider radishes too.
Yeah, like
they'll kick out pretty fast too. We used to do radishes first and then beets, like a little bit more delayed for that purpose. But I never had put together. I was just the chef on the farm at that time and just starting to. That was my sort of dabble into organics, was understanding living on a small sustainable farm, working with the farmers on it. And we did Elliott Coleman style of planting, so succession planting, extension of seasons. And so they would try and pack as much onto, high yield, low acreage. And so we would sometimes in a 1 square foot have 2 or 3 different vegetables going at one time. I never would have understood the sort of complex web that was happening between those plants at the same time. So it was still way over my head at that time, but now a clear glance of it. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So like beets and aloe are my 2 big ones. But like comfrey's another really good one to grow. If you can pull off yucca would be another good one. Yarrow is really good. If you want to grow
poi too.
Huh? What's that?
You can grow your yarrow and make poi at the same time, right? Isn't that start growing your own sweet potatoes and pounding them out in your backyard too? I can see that.
My uncle Wayne puts poi on fucking everything. He talks about it all the time, like it's some gift from the gods. He's like, oh, and guess what? There'll be poi. Like, no, I'm better off not knowing.
Starchy sweet potato goo. Great.
Don't insult poi in front of a Hawaiian, bro. That's where they get personal.
Yeah.
I'm not Hawaiian. You can say whatever the fuck you want. I'm a pasty ass white dude. I don't make poi.
So I heard comfrey, I heard aloe, I heard and beets in there too. So
yarrow,
you got some stacked pots, dude.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not growing all those things in my pot, but
No,
I'm
no.
making.
So
I'm
she's
convinced Rev
suggesting
to.
things for the patio. No,
yeah.
I have
It-
most of them. I had not thought about growing yucca. One of the benefits of where I do live is I'm in a very Mediterranean climate. I'm in Southern California, and so I have the ability to grow, like, my comfrey grows year round, and it's just constantly shooting up and doing great. And so it is wonderful. The only downside is I do have to grow in containers, which is a bit of a pain, but it's okay because I got nothing else to do.
if you can pull off growing bamboo is slept on.
Yeah,
Bamboo
there
sprouts.
was another one that we talked about recently that I've forgotten. Howling, do you remember? But it works well in shade, which I was amazed by. I was thinking about growing a container full, like a big old tub full of it. Now I've forgotten. It's well.
Damn
But
it.
bamboo is a good one.
Horsetail
Oh
is really good.
yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes, horsetail.
Yeah, we
That's
were
what it
talking.
was.
Oh, I just pulled it out
Talking
of the
about
ether.
horsetail. You're a
Got it.
genius. Well, no, you just know more than us, and you're like, yeah, it's probably the other option. But yeah, I was thinking about doing horsetail in the shade, but bamboo would be a good one. I hadn't thought about that, so I do thank you there.
You know what else? So what I'm actually doing this next run, I just ordered some. I just got them in. I got jasmine seeds, like climbing jasmine vine.
They smell so amazing.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna put a like a vertical trellis along the back wall of the tent, and then I'm gonna plant those jasmine along like the back of the pot, and I'm gonna train that jasmine to go up the tent on that back, and so
That's
it's just alyssum and jasmine, just like saturating the tent with their aromas, and this is kind of like
as someone. Sorry, I was going to say, as someone with a jasmine plant that it grows, what do you do with it? What would you recommend?
So this is what I get. So you can take the flowers, you can ferment them, you can introduce it. So I talked a little bit about methyl jasmonate and jasmonic acid. That compound was first discovered and is in the highest concentrations inside of jasmine flowers. It's the one that when you masticate the plant, it's like a survival hormone response, right, to make the plant grow really quickly. It's really high concentration inside of flowers, inside of jasmine flowers. So I wanted to be growing jasmine so I could, one, collect the flowers and ferment them, but also plants and microbes communicate through terpenes. And really we do too. All life communicates through terpenes. There's things that smell terrible to us and that are associated with danger, like decomposing carcasses, or feces, which we've evolved to the aroma is bad, right? While other things attract us to it, like the sweetness of a fruit. I don't know why I even mentioned that. Anyway, but the thing is, the communication through terpenes. So plants communicate through terpenes as well, and they will emit specific terpene profiles to either keep bugs away, to communicate that a plant is sick, and so on. And so I'm curious as to if I can create like a strong density of terpenes in an area of like that jasmine aroma, if it's actually going to affect the growth and expression of the plants around it. Because these are volatile organic compounds, all secondary metabolites. All volatile organic compounds evaporate. They're volatile. And when they volatilize, they communicate with things around them. So I'm hoping that by introducing jasmine into my beds, I increase the growth rate of my plants. And then I can also ferment if I'd like. So that's
it's also going to smell fantastic.
Cool. Yeah, right. Yeah. And so and it's going to look really cool, right? Like I'm going to have jasmine on the back wall, and there's going to be alyssum pouring out of the pots. It's just going to be badass. So it's an anecdotal, experimental, experiment, but it's also just going to look so fucking cool.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Best of both worlds.
Yeah, exactly. I'm excited. That'll be a cool one.
Yeah, I'm excited to think.
Because of those volatile compounds, can you like I know you're gonna grow. I mean, you have huge ass fucking pots. I think they're 150 gallons each. Not everyone's running that, but like, so if someone had a tent and they wanted to grow jasmine, what you're talking about, it sounds like you could still have a benefit even if you grew it in a pot near the plants that you want. It might not be the same pot,
Yeah.
but it could just be near it. Because that might be what I do. Because I'm gonna start up the 45-gallon pot, and I mean I probably just want my one plant in there and not add a bunch of stuff. But I'm like, well, how could I add something like jasmine or something in my tent?
Sure.
And maybe I could put a pot in a corner or something
Yeah.
and still get the same benefits. And if
Absolutely.
it doesn't work out, I just get to yank that one pot out. I don't have my whole cash crop going to hell because of it. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to share a root zone. That's just how I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those things are huge. So
yeah, I'm not worried about competition in that pot. That's one of the reasons why I picked such a huge pot.
And that pot takes up a whole 4x4 space, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's big. It's a big pot. It's a big pot. It's a big pot. It definitely messed with my vertical clearance. But I kind of just sent it and figured I'd figure it out along the way, and I did, and so it was fine.
How do you find room for your humidifiers and shit in there?
I don't have any humidifiers because I have 150 gallons of wet soil.
Yeah,
makes sense.
I still find I have to add so much early on when in the younger stages. It doesn't. I can't gain humidity. Yeah, but I only have a 3x3 bed, not a full 4x4. So maybe it's the added 50 gallons of soil and moisture that helps too.
Yeah. Also, mine are. Those beds, they're like 12 inches deep. I have 24 inches of soil vertically. So it's a lot. It's a lot of soil. And I live in a really dry climate. And if I lived somewhere that was more humid, I would have never tried to do what I'm doing now. But like right now it's 30% humidity outside or something. And it's like this pretty much all year round, even like drier in the winter and like peak parts of the summer. And so I was like, okay, I want as much soil as possible. I don't want to have to deal with a humidifier. I was like, I'm just going to put a ridiculous amount of soil in my bed and it'll be better for the plants. I can put other plants inside the bed with it or inside the pot with it. And then it'll increase my humidity drastically. So was part of the reasoning. And also a cool little thing too is the more soil you have, the more CO2 you have as well, because bacteria off-gas the CO2. So when you have a huge amount of soil in ideally a sealed environment, your CO2 will actually spike through the roof. I had a client who had a whole bunch of beds in a small space and his readings were over 2,500 ppm without supplementing at all.
Wow.
Right?
I think that's something I'm going to get to is get rid of my active intake with my 4x4s. I've been forcing in air and I think it's constantly cycling. There's no chance for CO2, but yeah, I got some setups I got to change too.
Yeah.
So did you find that as an anomaly or do you find that's
actually pretty common? If people are running living soil, like large soil masses of living soil, they naturally just have much higher CO2 levels, especially if they're doing sealed rooms and if they don't have companion plants. Because companion plants will take in the CO2, as carbon to build their cell walls, and then release oxygen, so you won't have as much. But if you're running a bunch of living soil without any companion plants or other plants in the space, your CO2 levels in a sealed room, your CO2 levels are going to just pump. It's crazy.
Are there a lot of folks that are doing larger scale living soil out there?
There's quite a few. There's a good handful. There's Green Life Productions. There's there's a few. There's probably 5 large scale living soil indoor facilities that are doing it.
I think that's what No-Till Kings also does.
Yeah.
I saw some videos.
Yeah, so No-Till Kings, they're one of them. I'm trying to remember. But
I've seen some other operations around the country that are doing it, but it's mostly concentrated in the Northern California, Oregon area. That's where I was curious to see if you
Florida,
because it's just just that amount of large volume. It really spiked my interest when you mentioned about the CO2 levels. and an added benefit that most people don't necessarily realize, and probably didn't realize until maybe that because we have folks in our a lot of people in our community that have large beds of soil one way or the other, and don't realize that they're actually benefiting because of that also from CO2.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance because you're going to have to be able to maintain your humidity without spiking your heat too high while maintaining like CO2 levels, which can be a pretty delicate dance, because if you run a dehumidifier in there to keep your humidity down because you have a ton of soil, your heat's going to go through the roof. We want higher temperatures when running high CO2, but keeping it at the right level in a sealed space without promoting a whole bunch of bacteria, like on the walls or whatever, like mold conditions, could be a little tricky. So while it is something that happens, I'm by no means trying to be like, seal your living soil space.
Right.
Pocket, like it's going to be work to figure it out. And you might
and it's one of the variables.
It's one of the variables, but living soil will off-gas a significant amount of CO2.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the word for it. I think I've come across this before, and it's not, transpiration is different. It's not something Asian. Is it
Asian?
Respiration, soil respiration or something like that?
Respiration.
Is it called? No, I thought it was like soil respiration or something like that, is the process of like all the things that are happening, giving off the CO2. I thought that was maybe it's not. I'll have to look.
I'm not familiar with that term. There probably is a word for it. We could look it up.
I mean, it's like something like, it's like just things with, like in our living soil beds, we have like a lot of microbial activity. We have a lot of death that happens. We have a lot of life that happens and breaking down, and CO2 is typically part of that whole process. So I'm wondering, I forgot the word for it. It was something like that. I thought there was an actual word.
It's soil respiration.
Okay. Yeah.
Autotrophic respiration.
Okay. All right.
Say that one again.
So there's autotrophic. I hate that.
You're learning us.
Autotrophic respiration. There's heterotrophic respiration. So autotrophic.
That can't be right.
I can't fucking speak. Autotrophic respiration is CO2 released by the living roots of plants. Heterotrophic respiration, CO2 released by soil microorganisms as they decompose organic matter such as dead plants and animals.
Okay.
There we go.
I learned something
let's
today.
all just be honest that we're shocked. Yeah. I was gonna say, let's just all be shocked that Howling couldn't remember that. What a hack!
I know.
Bazinga.
I did have a question, just because we're talking about living soil and cover crops and stuff. There is a lot of debates about what makes a good cover crop, or even to do it. Like I know Green Life does cover crops, I believe. But then there's other people like Kiss Organics doesn't believe in cover crops, and some other people don't either. Like, do you think that overall there's just a net benefit of just doing cover crops? Like, is that clearly you're doing it for, I've gone back and forth. I've used straw mulch. I've used even cardboard. I've used all sorts of things. I have done cover crops. Is there, like you mentioned earlier, like there's just this root mass that develops at the top, and you knew that like you high in celiac count, so you had to do a tea that I think you said you were promoting protozoa and stuff to balance it. And a lot of people are not going to know that starting off. Is it still beneficial to do a cover crop, even if you're not aware of all those other things that may be out of balance? Or
so you have to take into consideration like what problems you're going to run into. So I knew that growing in 150-gallon pots that were 4 fucking feet in diameter, that my plant growing in the center of them was going to allow for a lot of light to shine around the plant and dry out the soil volume on the edges of the pot, which is something we don't want. We want consistent moisture retention throughout the entire pot. So having it shaded and having a root that brings moisture from down low up high, I can amend in the center of my pot. I can water it in. I can water heavy at the center, and it'll fall down. The roots will bring it back up, and I'll have like a more consistent moisture on the outside while it's being shaded, and it won't dry out as much, right? So that's an issue that I knew I was going to have that was solved by companion plants. if I had several 15-gallon pots all packed together to form a sea of green, I'm not going to have that issue. And I would
Okay.
say companion plants would not be good, because now I have such a thick canopy that the light isn't going to reach through them, and the companion plants aren't going to grow anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very case by case based. And then as my plants got bigger, I was like, oh, I'm overcrowding my alyssum. And I kind of saw that was going to happen. I just kind of anticipated like this is going to happen in the long run. And I reached out to Grandmaster LED, because everyone was like, yo, like these lights are great, blah, 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 blah. They have under canopy. I saw, some of my friends running them too. And I was like, hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm doing companion plants. I'm going to get overshaded by my plant. I think that this could be a good opportunity to showcase under canopy lighting being effective as maintaining health for companion plants and cover crops and stuff. And he was like, yeah, absolutely, you just send them to me, which is great. Thank you. And then, so I would just say that it's case by case. So like, if you had a smaller soil volume, adding a bunch of plants to compete with your root zone, I think is a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the benefit of having a lot of protozoa on our surface layer gives me an advantage in a lot of ways, with nutrient cycling, quick decomposition of organic matter, quick decomposition of like amendments and top dresses and stuff like that. I do a lot of top dresses, and so many people are like, you are adding way too much top dress, like it's not going to break down, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, my soil will, your soil might not. Like if you're growing in you're growing in soil, you don't have worms, you don't have, all this other stuff going on. I absolutely don't recommend doing what I'm doing. But for my system, this is going to work great, doing small repeated doses of like amendment top dresses. And it's working great. So I would say, just like everything in living soil, I feel like we have a lot more tools at our disposal than hydroponic growers do. And they all have a time and place to overcome specific obstacles. Does that answer your question? I may have just convoluted.
No. I'm asking selfishly because I have waffled on the idea of using cover crops or not, and like I've done it, I haven't, and then now I'm going to start this, inspired by your tent series. We're going to be growing. A bunch of us are growing some of your genetics as little grow together, and I decided to go. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's a YAG unofficial grow together over on Cultivation Conversations Discord.
That also has Crafting Cannabis, which is another podcast. It has people from that over there. So like it's pretty cool that we have people from multiple communities just coming together. It just happened. I mentioned I was doing it. I gave away I gave some seeds to some friends, and they're like, hey, we'll grow it with you. And then it just kind of blew up, and now there's a bunch of us doing it. So I'm thinking about redoing. I decided to ditch. I have I've grown for a few cycles these 2 25-gallon bed type things on the autopot system. And I said, forget that. I'm going to go with the biggest I feel comfortable with without also costing an ass load in soil. And I went with a 45-gallon pot. And now I'm trying to think, like, do I follow along and I found some lavender colored alyssum. I'm like, I can grow it. But I was wondering is like, you were mentioning like the root mass and everything on the top, the heavy nutrient cycling. And I'm like, oh shit, am I getting over my head by planting that in a 45-gallon pot? Or is that, and I'm also thinking my plants, I build out a canopy. I train it out to have a canopy, and like, is that going to shade the cover crop too much? And so now I'm just like wondering if it's beneficial enough to do it still or not.
You're going to have multiple 45s close together?
No, I'm just going to have the 145 and a 4x4 tent.
I would just rock mulch.
Probably do 2.
Johnny, I haven't gotten my check from YAG yet to pay for that soil.
There's room for 2.
I would just rock.
You'd have to get a second mortgage to fill.
What would you do?
I wouldn't do companion plants in that situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, it's like, it looks cool. Like, there's a lot of benefits. I would love doing it, but I'm just like, I don't know. I'm like, that's not a 150-gallon pot. And if you grow out beyond the boundaries of the pot, like now you're shading it, and now you have a different problem.
Exactly.
And yeah.
My alyssum has now grown up and over my under canopy lights. It's like,
It's a jungle in
Oh my
itself.
goodness.
Don't
It's
mention
crazy.
the actual main cannabis plants in there. That itself is a jungle growing.
It's cool. I love it. I'm having so much fun doing it.
So, and I mean, you mentioned you're going to do the jasmine and the backdrop. So you're going to continue with this tank. I think this was, you don't typically grow in tents, and this was just to kind of show your methods in a tent. But it looks like you're going to continue at least another round.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
This was the first time in my life I've ever grown in a tent.
You're average. All right, there we go. Your average grow. Perfect. Thank you for coming out and being vulnerable. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Showing us your true side. Glad
the first grow that I ever had when I was running hydro, when I was like 20 years old, was I built a 10 by 10 room out of Armax insulation, and a frame with my roommate at the time.
As one would.
And, we had like, whatever it was, like two of those, like flood tables that, just on the concrete, and growing in cocoa core, running the Lucas formula, but so I'm actually like growing in a smaller scale than the first time that I ever grew. This is the smallest scale I've ever done. But I don't know why.
Downsizing, man. The state.
I'm down.
The state of the economy. You have to downsize.
My main hustle now is consulting.
Right on.
And this was like a passion project where I just kind of wanted to do whatever I wanted. And with it being so small scale, I could just do whatever I wanted, and it wouldn't be that crazy. And I'm blessed enough to have a lot of friends in the industry, and I just kind of got hooked up with a whole bunch of stuff too, just from like doing podcasts and establishing like a reputation amongst living soil people. And so I just, so I decided to do that. And so I can showcase my seeds, show people what my genetics can do, show off like a whole bunch of different techniques, and teach people how to do living soil on like a tent scale. So like get the information out there, have an opportunity to talk about the techniques and the reasoning behind them. I don't expect anyone would actually follow exactly what I'm doing, but taking different bits and pieces and integrating it is kind of what my goal was. And I keep getting people being like, you do not need to do all this stuff. Like, this is so over the top and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, I know, like I'm aware. I'm doing it because I want to. I could very easily
I also don't need to change my underwear every fucking day. Shut up.
Yeah. I don't need to brush my teeth, but I could have very easily thrown a seed in a big pot and watered it only and just took pictures of it every now and then, but it doesn't make for a very good opportunity to explain sciences behind, like soil and plants and stuff like that. So yeah, I am definitely doing the most with this series, but I really enjoy it, and it's just fun and a hobby. And the weed is, I want everyone to try it. It's like, it reeks and it's sticky. It's been sticky like since week 3. It's been crazy resinous and sticky and aromatic since the beginning. And so I can't wait for another couple weeks to harvest and get to try it soon after. And coincidentally, the timing kind of works out for when y'all are doing your grow along, because I'm going to grow along with the same genetics that y'all are growing. And cool. We're going to do a collective grow along.
That'd be awesome, because I mean, we're not only seeing the practices you put into place with your own genetics, but I mean, you've been really receptive to answering questions and stuff. I know on the cultivation conversation Discord. So like, it's gonna be kind of cool. Like, we're growing this one, trying to do some of your practices, and you give like some pointers, and we can see what can be done. It's gonna be fun. I think I'm going to get the seeds wet. There's a full moon on Sunday, so I think that's when they're going to get. I think Moon Diamonds is going to get wet. Although now everyone has me.
I'll be there Sunday. Can I piss on it?
You jerk! No, you can swirl the seeds in your mouth a little bit. All right.
All right. Spit is better. Spit is better than piss. Well, there's one other
weirder. That's weirder. What?
Hey, wouldn't you like to have your seeds watered in the soil with some fresh piss? I just did it to a bunch of tangy seeds to test germ rate, if I'm not going to lie.
I am not doing your style of growing.
I know. The
Here we go.
disrespect.
I made a note. We're gonna germinate at the same time. That's probably backwards for you, but it says germinate. Terrible handwriting, but it says germinate on Sunday. I'm just gonna leave it right here on my desk.
Why?
So,
I'm pretty sure I read that as fuck howling. That seems a bit
that
rude,
was
but-
it.
exactly what it looks. That's actually what it
Fuck howling.
Little did you know that you were going to get a lesson in Sanskrit today.
Yeah.
Although now I want to
wonderful.
run I may do a small pot one. I'm gonna do moon diamonds in the 45 gallon, but I might just stick a small pot in that tent for what is it? What did Gannick say he's gonna share? It's the silver moon haze. So I may I may stick that in there.
That's a good one too. Those have 2 different flowering times though.
Yeah, and there's only one correct one. It's the
no,
haze.
there is
You
not
should
a
pair the
correct
haze.
one, Rev. Okay, so maybe I'll split the tents. Maybe I'll find something else to run in there. You know what? This is me being chaotic because I have never run just one plant in the 4x4.
You just
but
don't like it because you're freaking out.
No, I've gone from like 6 plants to 4 plants. This last 2 runs were 2 plants, and it's still too much. So I'm like, okay, I'll do 1 plant now. But like,
You're a plant hoarder.
Cool about that.
You're hoarding
like,
your
I need
plant.
another one.
You're the Sauron of fucking plants.
So we will see. I will see if I stick another one in there. But yeah, okay. I will not. I'll put that one in another tent just to not make my life even more hard than it needs to be.
Keep after him, Luna. He'll get a whole 2 more tents going too.
Shut up.
He's gonna have like 9 plants on this tent in the same pot.
I know. Sea of green in his 45 gallon with a different genetic in each one.
Just train them all out sideways, just
there we go.
Oh, that would be cool.
And somehow it'll still be fire. Somehow,
of course, he's a fantastic grower.
It's stressful. I'm going to easy now.
Only you could look at a beautiful plant and be stressed, my dear friend.
That is what I.
No going
and
back.
only you can prevent forest fires.
That's a lie. Lightning starts fires all the time. Smokey the Bear lied to us, and I'm disappointed.
He lied to us.
Turns out it was proper. No, I'm just kidding. Have you seen the other Smokey? This is a total side note, but have you seen the other Smokey the Bear characters that the Park Service has come out with over the years? There's some wild
like moose and shit, and
yeah, there's like I think quite literally there's one that's like bug backwards. That's like a litterer, and he points his guns at other people, like and all this shit. He's like, "Don't be a bug." Yeah, it's wild. The 30s, 40s, and 50s they had a bigger marketing budget and a lot of cocaine, I would assume.
That's so funny. Give me 1 second. I gotta feed my cat.
Yeah.
Come on. Cat's fed.
What's crazy was that took 3 days.
I know.
I've been sitting here.
You know how hard it was to get these clothes back on?
Oh my god!
Find
Hold
the
position for that long. So seamless transition.
Yeah, just freeze frame. All to make 4 seconds of editing easier. But I do always ask one stupid random question every time we get one of these circles.
Okay, what's your stupid random question?
Oh, I'm still thinking about it. Don't rush me. I have to like vamp for like
hurry
4
the
minutes.
Fuck up. I don't have all day.
I know.
Got cats starving and everything. Come on.
I know.
My cat died of starvation.
Okay,
in the
fine.
3 days that I waited for you.
If you know what happens when you rush me, I go, if you had to kill one cat, what cat would you kill? See, horrible question.
It would be my roommate's cat. It would be my roommate's cat.
Well, fair.
Yeah. The one that steals my cat.
I am going to go into Howling's favorite holiday. It's time to ask yet another ridiculous seasonal question. This year on YAG, I am going to ask one by one what everyone's favorite fall snack or beverage is this year. Johnny, what is it, my friend?
It's for me, it's easy. It's fucking apple cider and apple cider donuts.
See, fantastic. Howling?
Pumpkin spice latte. I'm basic. I look forward to it. I need pumpkin in my life.
Are you also a chick?
I am.
Yes.
Sorry.
I've never heard a man say, "You know what I need in my
I don't
life?
give
It's
a
some
shit.
pumpkin spice."
I am comfortable enough. to
He's
say
down
that.
with the PSL. He also wears. Wait, I was gonna make a white girl joke, but I can't remember. It'd been horrible.
It was probably a
Um,
blonde white girl joke then.
I got 2 sisters, dude. I've seen all kinds of that stuff they do. Stoney, follow that nonsense.
Red wine braised short ribs and mashed potatoes. Roasted parsnips too, especially this time of year.
Jesus, I mean, fucking all fancy. I feel bad now for our
It's
guest,
fucking
Luna.
delicious. Smell that.
Jesus Christ. I mean, I'm a
I
huge
know.
fan of sweet potatoes. So like candied yams. Candied yams are great. And I'm Italian, and Grandma would always make lasagna for Thanksgiving. So I'm gonna go with candied
The
yam
gravy.
lasagna.
Thank you. I grew
Not
up
very
eating
seasonal.
lasagna
I
at
like it.
Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
and I married my wife, who is from an Irish family, and they're like, lasagna for Thanksgiving? What the hell is that? I'm like, what are you talking about? I can't have lasagna anymore. This sucks.
Staple of Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Lasagna is a staple of Thanksgiving in my household or in our
Mhm.
family home. I don't know. Whatever.
What about you,
I
Ref?
think that's a wonderful answer.
And
I
ham
don't live.
sandwiches.
That's
He
see.
doesn't
That's
have
cool.
seasons, dude.
I don't live in a place with seasons. So
You're about ready to visit one soon.
I know. I was gonna say September is the hottest month in my area, so my fall doesn't start yet. So maybe when it gets closer to that, I'll come up with an answer. But it's still like it was 90 degrees today, so I don't know what fall is.
Well, you'll figure it out this weekend coming to Chicago. So
But I will tell you, as a former barista, pumpkin spice is definitely not one of my favorites. Just the trauma of every single person ordering it.
I can't. I mean, did you go through a period of time where you couldn't even smell the shit anymore?
Yeah, there's.
Oh, that
Yeah,
sucks.
we had to test. We had to test espresso hourly, and we towards the end of it, I would just mix
is
whatever
that
the hell with
legal?
it to taste.
You know what? We're
It's-
just gonna
yeah,
drug
just-
you every hour on the hour.
Who knew? Who knows? But it is. I did have to like literally come up with concoctions towards the end, just to make it go down. Like, let's try this with a whole pump of this garbage and do it like shooters. It was a healthy career choice. And I left to go into shops again, which is always fun. But again, this podcast isn't about me. Thank you for that wonderful answer, guys. Does anyone have any other questions they didn't want to or they wanted to ask that we didn't get to?
Want to ask?
That they didn't want to ask? Is there any questions they didn't want to ask? Huh? Good. Still
didn't
didn't
wanna
want to
bring
ask
up
them.
that. I didn't want to bring it up, but
Yeah, no. Did we miss anything? I'm sure we could talk forever.
yeah, my
No.
stomach can't. I'm fucking starving, and there's tacos downstairs. So.
Killer. Well, thank you so much, Luna, for coming on. We really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I did have one final note, Johnny. This counts as another D&D guest because she's going to be joining us for our next session, hopefully. So I've already gotten another one past you some bitch.
Right on. Hey, my son's gonna join too. If like
I know
that's
your
what
son
happens,
is too, but I was going to wait for that one.
Do
But
you know?
yeah.
Okay, so final thing. Do you know what my son? I was just in Vermont for my son's wedding. Do you know what his bachelor party was?
Playing D&D?
D&D. Yep.
Good man.
That's awesome. That's very
But he was
wholesome.
smart enough. He did not invite me because he knows I don't know. I have the imagination for it. I would ruin the whole thing on them. I would
Oh,
ask
it's
like
so
tons
much
of
fun.
questions and contribute nothing.
It's
But I
fun.
thought that was awesome. He was authentically himself. He did not try anything else. D&D was his bachelor party.
That's
I was like,
amazing.
that is awesome.
that's really cool.
Was
Yep.
everyone like topless during the D&D?
Well,
Or-
my other son tried to turn it into a more
That'd be-
X-rated bachelor party.
Just the men.
But they stuck strictly to the D&D.
Okay, gotcha.
Good on him. But seriously,
kinda
thank
wanna
you
play.
so much for joining us.
Yeah,
You're
thank you
gonna
for
play,
having me.
Johnny.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We
Yeah.
appreciate your knowledge. I hope we can call on it again in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm in y'all's Discord and the other Discord, and you should join my Discord. And
Hell yeah. We'll put
yeah.
a link for everybody to come join.
All right.
Yeah, Howlin will.
Yes,
Yes,
he
I
will.
will.
We'll shoot some dice in the future too.
Hell yeah.
Now we're talking. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
See you soon.
Later.